Your mom stopped fixing everything, and now your family feels like it's imploding. You called her selfish. You begged her to go back. But forcing her into that old role is exactly what will destroy your relationship forever. Here's the brutal truth you don't want to hear. You were never angry at her boundaries. You were terrified of what they revealed about you. Every rescue was keeping you small. Every fix was training you to fail. The day she said no wasn't abandonment. It was the first time she truly loved you enough to let you grow. This is what happens when a mother stops being the family's emergency brake, and why that cruelty is the greatest gift she could give you. There was a woman named Elena. For 30 years, she was the human equivalent of duct tape. Crisis at 2 a.m., she was there. Sibling screaming match, she mediated. Adult son couldn't pay rent, she covered it. She wasn't just a mother, she was the family's insurance policy against ever facing real consequences. But 3 months ago, something broke inside her. Or maybe something finally fixed itself. Because Elena stopped answering those calls. She stopped showing up to emergencies she didn't create. And here's what nobody expected. Her family didn't rally together. They turned on her. You probably think I'm about to tell you that Elena's family came around, that they realized her worth and apologized. But that's not what happened. Her daughter called her a narcissist. Her son accused her of playing favorites. Her husband of 32 years, moved into the guest room because he said he couldn't live with her negativity. The negativity in this case was Elena saying she needed a weekend to herself. But here's the hidden cost nobody talks about. When one person stops overfunctioning, the entire system collapses. Not because the system was healthy, but because it was built on a lie. The lie that someone else would always absorb the pain. Elena didn't plan this. She didn't read a book about boundaries and decide to weaponize them. She hit a wall. A physical one, actually. She was driving her daughter's car to the mechanic because her daughter forgot to get the oil changed. And Elena realized she couldn't feel her left arm. Panic attack, hospital, 3 days of tests. And in that silence, hooked to monitors, she understood something terrifying. She had spent 3 decades managing everyone's chaos because it was easier than facing her own emptiness. But the body keeps score. And her body was finally refusing. You might think the story turns here. That Elena had her revelation and her family respected it. But that's the fantasy we sell ourselves about growth. The truth is messier. When Elena came home from the hospital, she tried to explain. She sat at the kitchen table and said, "I can't be the only one holding us together anymore." And her family heard, "I don't love you enough to try." Because that's what happens when you stop overgiving. People don't see a healthy boundary. They see withdrawal of love, and they panic. Her daughter stopped speaking to her for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence because Elena wouldn't co-sign a loan for a business she knew would fail. But here's where it gets interesting. During those 6 weeks, something happened that had never happened before. Her daughter got a job. A real one. Not the dream career she'd been planning for 5 years while living rent-free. A job. She hated it. She complained daily. But she kept showing up. Because Elena wasn't there to buffer reality anymore. And reality, it turns out, is a better teacher than any mother's sacrifice. You see, we think love is doing. We measure it in favors fixed and fires extinguished. But Elena had been loving her family into incompetence. Every time she swooped in, she sent a message. You can't handle this. Only I can. It's the soft bigotry of overhelp, the belief that our suffering is nobler than their struggle. But nobility is just ego wearing a halo. And Elena was exhausted from being a saint. The hardest part wasn't the anger from her family. It was the grief. Grief for the role she'd played. The indispensable one. The martyr. When you stop being needed, you have to face who you are without the costume. Elena had to ask herself, if I'm not the fixer, what am I? And the silence that followed that question was the loneliest sound she'd ever heard. Her husband eventually came back to their bedroom, but not because she convinced him. Because he tried to make his own coffee one morning and burned it. And in that small failure, he realized he'd been outsourcing his competence to her for decades. He said, "I don't know how to need you without using you." That sentence took them 3 months of therapy to unpack. But it started with him admitting he was lost without her rescues. Not grateful. Lost. The daughter? She called on a Tuesday. No emergency, just to talk. She said, "I used to think you were magic. Now I think you were just tired. I'm sorry I made you carry us." That was the moment Elena understood. The boundary wasn't the wall between her and her family. It was the door she finally closed so they could learn to knock, so they could learn to stand on their own 2 feet and discover they were capable of more than they'd imagined. You were never angry at her boundaries. You were terrified of discovering who you'd be without her crutch. The crutch feels like love until you try to walk without it and realize your legs were always strong enough. They just never had to be. The gift isn't the boundary itself. It's the space the boundary creates. The space where you finally meet yourself and realize you've been waiting there all along. So if your mother stopped fixing things, don't call her back to the old role. Thank her for the chaos she's refusing to manage, because that chaos was always yours to face. And now, finally, you get the chance to grow into the person she always believed you could become. The emergency brake isn't broken. She just took her foot off it so you could learn to drive.